Okay, everybody, we are here for the live premiere collectibles signing of The Wise Men Who Found Christmas. And I'm delighted to be joined by my friend, not only my Fox and friend, but my real friend.
We are real friends.
Yeah, for a long time, long before
Our
this.
family's in vacation together.
That's true. Rachel
how
Campos
close we
Duffy,
are.
who is herself an esteemed children's author of Paloma Wants to Be Lady Freedom.
And you helped me with that book.
That was such a sweet book.
Thank you.
It's a great
So
book.
listen, I'm excited
Okay.
about this book. We're going to get right to the questions. I know your fans want you to answer these questions, but I celebrate the Three Kings Day. I know they do it in
We
Louisiana.
do it in New Orleans,
You
yeah.
guys do it in New Orleans, but Hispanics love Three
Well-
Kings Day. And my kids get presents from Santa Claus and from the Three Wise Men.
Right.
So I love that you did this.
Well, I think it important because, as you mentioned, Hallmark did a study, and a friend of mine at Hallmark told me this. The most popular figures of Christmas above Santa Claus internationally in Eastern Europe, in South America, even in parts of America, it's the wise men, it's the Magi. But we know so little about them. So I said, we had a big hit a few years ago with The Spider Who Saved Christmas. So I
Another
thought,
great book.
well, and that was an old legend, but it points to the reality of the nativity, which I love. So I said, what else can I do in that vein? Is there another character figure that we've missed or don't know? The donkey has been overdone. I've seen all the donkey things. So I thought, wait a minute. The other figures that we see every year and we know nothing about are either St. Joseph or the wise men.
That's right.
Let's look at who these wise men are. Turns out, Rachel, when I started digging, everything I thought I knew about these guys, they were three kings from the Far East, all wrong.
Really?
That is wrong. Historically wrong.
Okay, we got to get all this
We're going to
right.
get into this. And
Okay.
so I captured some of the research, and there's so much. I could do like 5 hours on this. This could be its own, Ken Burns special.
Yeah.
But
You're like a theologian now.
no, it's
Yeah.
but it's so deep.
It is.
The archaeological evidence, the historical evidence, and then the biblical evidence contradicts everything we think we know. Let's go back to the first thing. You
Okay.
got three wise men. I isolated it to three because it's easier to tell a story.
Of course.
But the Bible doesn't talk about three wise men anywhere, Rachel. It says there were three gifts. St. Matthew's gospel just says there were three gifts presented. Doesn't say anything about the wise men. So I found this old Coptic manuscript that's about the same time as Matthew's gospel. 60 wise men, 60.
Really?
The Armenian and Syrian church, 12 wise men. So how many were there? We don't know, but there were probably more than three. So, and I don't want to spoil this for everyone, but if you look closely at the first, and there are great things you can do. Diane Le Feyer, my illustrator, just blew my
Listen, the
mind with
pictures-
this book.
The illustrations are spectacular. I mean, they're so rich. You just feel
Yeah.
like you're
No,
in
they
the story.
pop up. It's
Yeah.
really like it pops at you. But what I love about this, there are my three primary wise men in the front. Count them all. There are 12 on the rooftop. So
Mm,
I decided to wink at it in the illustrations
interesting.
because it was probably going, but these are the three leaders, if you will, who really take the lead. But there's a caravan that goes to see the Christ child, not just the three. You'll see them in the background. There's also a good reason for 12. And I'll get into that later. But I was so in love when I saw, where did they come from? They're not in the Far East. They're not in Persia. Where did they come
So
from?
where?
They came from what is today modern day Petra, which is about a 3 to 5 day journey to Jerusalem. Petra was a kingdom known as the Kingdom of Nabateh. Nabateh, turns out, and this is how we know this, and the archaeologists as well as historians have traced it. What were the three items that Petra and the Kingdom of Nabateh most known for? Myrrh and frankincense is only created there in Arabia. It's southern and northern Arabia. They controlled it all. And you've heard of King Solomon's mines, the gold mines?
Yes.
Kingdom of Nabateh had control of it. So if I were to send you a gift, Rachel, and said, I sent one of my sons and said, look, when you go up to New Jersey to see the Duffys, bring them things from New Orleans.
Of course.
I put red beans and rice in a jazz CD and I don't know, a king cake in the basket and
Yes.
send it to you. Well, the things that were known in Nabateh, and they were very expensive gifts, were frankincense, gold, and myrrh. I'll tell you the real meaning
That
of
makes
that
so much
as we
sense.
go on. So that's another indication of this is where they
But
came.
is it, so your last book was legend. This
Yes.
is not legend.
No. This is the true story of the wise men. This is not a legend. In fact, I'm trying to rescue these three magi from the legends, because the reality is so much more interesting. The political reality, the stakes, the danger they place themselves in, because if they're from this kingdom, they're going into a warring kingdom. And I'll tell you a little more later about King Herod, his relationship with the king of Nabateh, King Aretas. Why did he send these wise men? He sent them. Why? What was the motivation? I'll fill you in later.
Okay, so
That's called a teaser.
it's a great teaser. So so there's so many people that have questions.
Yes.
So I'm gonna go to their questions, and I have one myself.
Oh,
Okay, so this person, Kaylee, wants to know, what is the main theme? What do you want people to get out of reading this book? Is it just for people of faith?
no, it is not. It is for everyone. Everyone who's ever imagined they knew who these wise men were, or if you thought they were three kings. And there's good reason for that. But the whole king's legend, that didn't crop up until the 6th and 8th centuries. So that's
Were they
hundreds of
astronomers?
years. Oh, yes, they were very likely astronomers, or if they weren't astronomers, they were people who looked to the lunar cycles. They understood the Greek, the Babylonian, the Zoroastrian astrological signs. So they were looking to the skies. They were looking for things they didn't see in front of them. And that's what I love about the wise men. They're like us. They should be like us, where you keep your eyes on what's not quite seen. You keep looking beyond the horizon at something greater and striving for that. And that's what I love about them. But they clearly were learned men, wise men, but magi. Magi is the root for magic. They were magicians, they were astrologers, they were interpreters of dreams. In the Old Testament, we see Daniel, others are interpreters of dreams. That was an important skill in these kingdoms because their knowledge was limited. So here you have clearly men who, very likely, Zoroastrian priests or Jewish priests of the first temple, which I'll get to. That's the theory I now subscribe to after looking at.
So might as well just get to it. What's the first?
Okay,
temple?
the
Let's
first
get to it.
temple. This is really cool. There was a woman, Margaret Barker. I have to give her full credit. Margaret Barker is an 80-plus-year-old Cambridge-educated biblical scholar who reads the ancient languages. Margaret believes, and I now believe, if you look at the first temple, on the roof of the first temple, there were astrological signs and astrological symbols on the roof. So they were the first temple priesthood was very attached to God speaking through signs in the sky. They were already attached.
God does speak through
Okay,
signs.
and through nature. So they were
Yes.
clued in. The other thing is they were expelled. The first temple priesthood was expelled by King Josiah. This is in the Old Testament. Expelled 700 years before Jesus ever shows up. Where did they go? They went to Arabia. Very likely the kingdom of Nabateh. These may well be the descendants of that first temple priesthood, the keepers of the faith. They were holding on. So they're looking to the stars, yes, but they were very familiar
So
with
you
the
think they
prophecies.
were Jewish?
Yes, they were Jewish. They were descendants of that Jewish temple, and they may have been themselves first temple priests in exile, members of the royal priesthood. So when they see the sign and say a Messiah is coming, it doesn't make sense for someone in China or someone in
Right.
Persia to go looking for a Jewish Messiah. Why? There's no religious drive. But if you're very familiar with the first temple priesthood and you believe a Messiah is coming, and indeed he's part of your line, you're going to break neck to get to him. And that's what I believe happened here. And I'll tell you later why those three gifts are important and what Margaret put me on to. There's a writer in the first century, Philo of Alexandria, who breaks down gold, frankincense, and myrrh and what they meant to the first temple priesthood. And it will bring tears to your eyes when you put all this together.
So when
Okay.
you open this book,
Yes.
I noticed the star, and I'm going to tell you, this is for real.
Yeah.
I named my daughter Lucia Belen, which means light of Bethlehem,
Oh my gosh.
because I so love the story of the nativity
I
and the
didn't know
star.
that.
So whenever we talk about the wise men following the star, we say, "Oh, Lucia
You're
Belen,
our
you're our
little light."
star. You're our star of Bethlehem."
Wow.
So I just love that you did this story.
You're drawn to it. Well,
I'm drawn to it.
and
I'm
so-
so drawn to it.
And look, I was going to write a book. I was going to write a chapter book on this for adults. And I got through 3 chapters and thought, this is missing the point. This is a family read
That's
and a
right.
family book. Let's introduce families to the adventure of this. The legend gets blown away, and the reality is so much more interesting. In the back, I have a lot of the notes, some of the stuff we're talking about. You'll find that in the back for the adults, but the kids are going to love this story.
Yeah,
it's a
the
high-stakes
pictures,
adventure.
I mean,
They're
and
animals.
all
It's fun.
ages, and all ages is one.
Yeah.
Those illustrations are amazing.
Yeah.
So, can we jump to something personal?
Okay.
Because people want to hear about the book, but people are obsessed with you, Raymond.
No, they're obsessed with me.
They
need a
wanna
better
know-
pastime.
How? This is from Ethan. How did you get your start in journalism?
How did I get my
broadcasting?
start in journalism? I went to NYU and I was in the theater for many years. Directed, I acted. I always loved the written word. I did. I mean, that was what drew me. I did Shakespeare and Moliere and Racine, and I loved the classics. At the same time, I did a lot of writing in college. So when I left college, I was working for a casting agent here in New York. She had an uncle or a friend who was at the Associated Press, who introduced me to them because she knew I loved writing. I was working with her. So I was kind of one leg in the theater, the other leg at the Associated Press, where I started writing theater reviews and breaking news and kind of got into it that way. And then I loved it. I went to Washington, D.C. I worked for Bob Novak, who some people might remember.
I do.
Bob was the dean of the Washington Press Corps. 3 days a week, we had a column to write. His collaborator, Raleigh Evans, got very sick and died while I was working for them as their reporter. So I would ghostwrite or cobble together most of one of the columns. Bob did the other two. And I would do the legwork. At that time, there was no internet, boys and girls.
Boy, that's
I
a
was
lot
the
of
internet.
legwork, yeah.
So you're running to the morgue, pulling papers that day. But Bob taught me how to cross-examine people, how to work over witnesses, how to play them sources against each other, and the power of truth and dropping it in the middle of a conversation. And then Pat Buchanan runs for president. Bob Novak takes his place on Crossfire, and I started producing that segment. So that was kind of my introduction to all of this.
Wow. Do you miss acting?
Well, I do it every day. So no, I don't miss it. I do it every day. I use parts of that every day, Rachel,
Yeah.
because
But do you miss doing an actual
no,
production?
I don't, because I'll tell you what, I loved the theater. I love the theater to this day. I quickly found out after the third week of performance, I was bored with it. It didn't challenge me anymore
And the
because
news is always changing.
but the show is the same, and you got to kind of keep a level of performance. That's why when you look at somebody like Carol Channing or God rest her soul, Angela Lansbury, whom I knew and met and saw so many times, when you see people who've done a show 1,000
Oh,
times,
that's amazing.
these people are like, this is breathtaking talent to get dressed and get ready and devote your life to 8 o'clock every night and to deliver that. When you are bored to tears, you've said those lines 1,000 different ways.
Yeah.
And you're
That's
just
so funny because I'm not
Well,
an
you
actress,
don't
so I never
think
thought,
of it.
I don't think
No.
of it like that.
the sameness. This is why Marlon Brando left the theater. He hated the repetition of it. And I studied with Stella Adler, who was Marlon Brando's acting coach. I met him during college. And that was his thing. I got out. It was so boring.
Yeah.
3 weeks, 4 weeks, you're done. And I totally understood that.
Yeah.
Totally. So,
Fascinating.
yeah, but I use all of that. The theater, the writing. In the theater, you're really decoding personalities and people. And you're trying to see beyond, look at the exterior actions and see what that tells you about the interior motivations. So all of that I now, when I write one of these books, you're directing the whole play,
Yeah,
and you're
that's
playing
right.
every role. So
That's
you ask me, how do I use it? I use it there.
So I come from a Hispanic tradition
Yes.
around the wise men and
Yeah.
around celebrating Three Kings
Yeah.
Day. What are the traditions that your family has?
Yeah.
I'm sure you did.
We do.
Being in New Orleans.
Well, the Epiphany, which is January 6th, is the Feast of the Epiphany. That's King's Day, they call it. I'd like to argue that we call it Magi Day now, because kings, and I understand why they call it Three Kings. In the 8th century, Venerable Bede, who was a British scholar, priest, or brother, Venerable Bede created the names Caspar, Melchior.
So those
and
are real
Balthazar.
names?
I'm sorry to break your heart. They're not real. If you go to the earlier manuscripts, they're called Wahlakaluk and Frikalek. They have very
What
weird
about,
names
what
in
about
there.
the fact that they are from 3 different races?
Okay, here's the idea. And this, again, this is a 6th and 8th century kind of creation.
Okay.
But
It's very
it was-
multicultural.
yeah, it
Yeah.
is. Well, it is. But it was Venerable Bede who came up with the names Caspar, Melchior, and Balthazar. By the way, all those names mean is king in different languages.
Oh.
Kaiser, Kaiser from the German.
Sure.
Melchior is the Jewish Hebrew. There's a lot of Kiors all over the place in the Old Testament. And I can't remember where Balthazar is, but it's a different language. But it means king in those three separate tongues. Okay. So that's that. It was also Venerable Bede, sorry to break everybody's heart again, who gave us the ages of the three wise men. But he came up with that in the 8th century. That really doesn't, it's way down the line. So I kept those iconic archetypes because we know them, but I tried to blow the lids around the edges and err on the side of
how
history.
does the Arroyo family celebrate wise men?
Well, we celebrate in New Orleans, King's Day, the Epiphany, by the way, and that's why we celebrate 12 days of Christmas.
Yes.
You have Christmas, it ends on 12th night, Shakespeare. The 12th night is the Epiphany. January 6th.
Don't you just get so mad when people throw their tree?
I hate it. Oh, it infuriates me.
Me too. It's like, keep the party going.
Well, and we do. And we
do
not
too.
we not only
it's like a second Christmas.
It is. It's a big thing. No, new gifts. The kids get a second round of gifts. It's a big deal. And in Europe and South America, that's the day. It's not Christmas Day on the 25th. It's January 6th. That's their big feast day for Christmas when the Gentiles came and discovered the Christ child. So that's the day. In New Orleans, of course, it is sick celebration because we have the king
cake. A lot of alcohol.
Well, no, not only alcohol. It's the beginning of a lot of alcohol. We've already been on the alcohol wagon a long time. But on King's Day, January 6th, that's the beginning of the carnival season in New Orleans. Oh. That's the start of it. So you're about to party from January 6th all the way to Lent, to Ash Wednesday. So for us, you could be a pagan, Episcopalian, a Baptist, or nothing at all. Our Jewish friends, everybody joins in because it's part of our communal celebrations of Mardi Gras. So that day, January 6th, start of the carnival season, Mardi Gras bowls begin on that day. The king cakes come out. Everything starts. So you feel it in the air in a way in New Orleans that I don't think you feel anywhere else.
Wow, you've never been to Spain.
Spain and the Orthodox Church, of course. It's their big.
So do you guys in New Orleans also hide the baby Jesus inside the king cake?
It's in the cake. Yeah? It's in every cake, which I'm going to bring you on.
Roscon de Reyes for us.
Correct. And on Saturday, watch Fox and Friends because I'm appearing with you. I just learned.
Yeah.
And I'm bringing the king cake. I got. Joe Gambino's made me a special.
You know how to make Fox and Friends crew.
But I had to twist some arms because they don't make king cakes this early. I said, you got to make me a king cake. I got a book about the
no one has more hookup in the room.
Well, they were very kind to do it. So you'll watch that. We'll see if Rachel gets the baby. Just what she needs, another baby. But I'm pumped. Anyway.
Chances are I will get the baby.
As you should.
Actually, Pete's in good competition.
Oh, that right. Peg Seth or she is getting the baby, without a doubt. Do we sign? Do you want us to sign?
Okay, I'm gonna keep going.
I'm gonna sign while
you guys do the king's cake, you do the dinner, you have the gifts for the children.
Yes, all of that. And we usually get dressed, Rebecca and I usually get dressed up in tails and long dresses and go to a carnival ball that night.
Wow.
On January 6th. The old Mardi Gras cruise, that's when it starts. And so it's a big deal.
So because my kids are American kids, they get Santa Claus, right? So they get presents. But on Three Kings Day, they each get only 3 gifts, just like the baby Jesus.
Oh, how nice!
But that's still a lot when you multiply it by 9.
Right. No. So and Sean gets them. So you're talking 30 gifts. Where do you have time to shop?
I don't shop. The 3 wise men bring them. I have nothing to do with that. Okay. So
I'm glad you've adjusted to wise men from kings. I'm
gonna go off topic for you because I think this is a great question.
All right.
I love the chemistry between you and Laura. I think it's a match made in heaven. Can you give us a hint of your next book project?
The next book is called The Anchor Who Stole the Ratings. It's the Laura Ingraham story told from her infancy. So you think she's a queen, but she's actually just a princess. No, Laura, let me answer those 2 questions. And by the way, we have a special guest star, if I can get him to come around. And he's wearing his lumberjack costume for us. Sean Duffy is here.
It's not a costume.
I just came to check out the fun.
Yeah, well, we are having fun, and we're not even drinking yet.
Yet.
Thank you. So how many trees did you level? Just a few?
Just a couple.
Here in New York? Good. Okay. Laura and I go way back. We did the radio show together. In fact, I wrote a book about a biography of Mother Angelica. I went on Laura's radio show. I was booked for one segment, an 8-minute segment, which is a lot of
Yeah.
time in radio. When it was over, she said, will you stay through the next break? I said, sure. We kept talking. We got to the half hour. Why don't you just stay for the next hour? Like, okay. That was literally the first time we met. It was instantaneous, but you know this with chemistry. You click with some people, you don't with others. We just clicked. It was there, and that.
The rest is history.
Well, that relationship was always kind of, you know, we were like brother and sister sparring. It was fun, lighthearted. It brought something out in her that I think is lighter and fun. And
you
so,
do bring out the best in
yeah, well, and sometimes she wants to sock me, but I'm far away if I'm not in the room. But so that's that. My next book project is an amazing series from HarperCollins, which I am so excited about. I've been working on it for years, called Turnabout Tales. And I think all of our lives have a turnabout tale where you are confronted with a crisis, and in that moment you make a decision. And in the cases of the people I profile here,
Are these true stories?
these are true American lives that have been forgotten.
Love it.
Great American lives. The first book is Thomas Edison, and it's the unforeseen light of Thomas Edison. I'm missing the title. It's something like that. You look it up. Look up Thomas Edison Arroyo. It'll come up. But his turnabout tale was I won't ruin it, but there's a major crisis he faces as a young person. He and his mother make a decision that not only opens up his entire destiny, but creates everything we use today.
Yeah.
The speaker on the phone, the lights, everything, the lighting grid, the electric car, the alkaline battery, all of that is Thomas Edison, and it would never have happened had he and his mother not made a decision. So Turnabout Tales is coming
Okay,
next
so
March.
this
That's
brings
it.
me to the next question that I
Yes.
think. You've written New York Times bestsellers that are
You
books
did
for
too.
adults. Yes, I
Last
did.
Christmas, as I recall.
But you've written
You
for
and the lumberjack.
Yes, I did. Me and that lumberjack, that
Yeah.
cute lumberjack over there.
He
So
cut the
you-
paper. by
Yeah,
hand.
I did.
All every edition.
You know what? As Europe is chopping wood right now, I just want you to know when I first married Sean, we had a fireplace
I
and our wood was all chopped by Sean. So
Oh,
he's not a fake lumberjack. He really did chop wood.
I almost came up with a line, but I'm leaving it.
Leave it.
I'm
leave
not.
it.
I'm not
Don't go
picking it
there.
up.
Okay.
I'm just
so
letting it rest.
here's let it rest. I know where you're going.
There.
Okay, so
A family show,
it's a
Rachel Duffy.
family
Keep it clean.
What is the difference, or what do you prefer? I mean, you've written, like I said, New York Times bestselling books for adults and for children. What's the difference? What do you prefer?
I don't write for children. I tell people this all the time.
I love that.
I don't write for children. And this book,
It's for families.
it's a
you said.
family read because
That's right.
I read a quote. I couldn't figure out because I call these family reads. I don't call them picture books because a family will inevitably
That's
sit around
exactly
and
how
read
it
this
does that.
together.
That's exactly
That's
how it
why
does.
I thought the perfect vehicle for this story, because it's a family celebration around Christmas, is a picture book. It's the only way to get the family to read together. Had I written a chapter book of this thing, I would have gotten a very small readership, and the kids and the older people would not have dedicated that much time to involve
I agree
themselves
with
in the
you.
wise
I
thing.
agree.
This initiates them in, they're hooked, they get it, and they can move on and have a great celebration. That was my intention. L. Frank Baum, who wrote the Wizard of Oz series, once wrote, and I really do subscribe to this, I write for the young and the young at heart.
That's
And I
right.
almost
That's what
cry
he
when I
says.
say
Yeah,
that
I
because
know.
he said that because I have 90-year-old fans, I have 5-year-old fans, and I see them. And I have to tell you, well, you have children in your lives, you know this. When kids come up to you at a signing or they stop you on the street and they say, "Oh my God, I read your Spider book," or "Tell me what happens in Will Wilder," which is my middle grade thing. I'm like, you just want to melt. It's just, this is why we do what we do. Television's fun, but this is leaving when you give a child a story, you're giving them a path into life that no one else can give. And when they take your story to heart, it's not your story anymore, it's theirs. But to have been involved in that is to me, the
No,
greatest
you're right. It is.
gift
It
there
is the greatest gift. I had a teacher send me one of Paloma Wants to Be Lady Freedom.
Oh,
It was the whole hallway, and they were from Texas.
they
Little
drew
children
pictures.
telling their Lady Freedom story.
Oh.
Little immigrant Mexican children
No,
who are so happy to be
beautiful.
Americans now, and it was touching. I get what you're
It
saying.
changed your life. No,
It
it changed. It touches you
Okay,
deeply.
but so let's go in this other direction. because
Okay.
This is another thing that I like. This is. I know you
Sign.
said that the book is for anybody, whether they have faith or not. But let's
Yeah.
be honest.
Okay.
You're doing something very countercultural by bringing the meaning of the season back.
Well,
So what does that mean to you? How much of that played into your decision to tell this story? The fact that Christmas is so secularized. And as a Christian, that's kind of a sad thing.
this book, and like everything I write, it's like Indiana Jones. Okay. You can watch Indiana Jones and other people can watch Indiana Jones. You're going to get more out of it because you understand the iconography, the backstory. When they have the cross of the Crusader, it's like, oh, you know the Crusaders, you know the cross, you know what that means.
That's so true.
But there are other people who don't, but it's a good story. That's kind of what this is. Of course, people of faith are going to decode this on a separate level. And look, I teased this earlier. I'll give you the payoff. If these guys are who I think they are, if they are really descendants of, and by the way, I want to point out, look at the headdresses. The headdresses all match. So they are of some priestly caste by design. They're not kings. They don't have big turbans. This is kind of priestly wear. And the question is, which priesthood are they a member of? We can't say definitively.
But you think it is.
I think they're first temple Jewish priest descendants. They were cast out 700 years before Jesus. They were in exile in Arabia and likely in Petra. They would have been consuls to the king because it was the biggest Jewish community outside of Jerusalem and Judea was in Arabia, and most importantly in the kingdom of Nabateh. So there was a big influx. They were the only ones who would have been obsessed enough with the Jewish prophecies
to follow the star.
To look for a star, be looking for the signs because they knew the prophecies. And it was a daring trip. They're crossing over borders. Herod was a murderous, I can't say the word I want to use, it's a family show. He was a horrible person.
Yes.
He killed 3 of his sons and his wife to protect his throne. And that was before he heard that there was a new king in town, which is why he tells them, oh, there's a new king? Good. Go find him and come tell me where he is because I want to go worship him.
Yeah.
And in the book, you'll see he clearly makes his intention clear. That's why they don't go back to him. But it's very dangerous. This is a dangerous journey these guys go on. And that's part of the reason they go different ways. They go elsewhere to avoid him. But they don't go back to Nabateh either because the kingdoms were aligned. They needed each other. The trade routes ran through Judea. So they needed each other. And very likely, I spoke to a Herod scholar the other day, Jewish guy who's brilliant. And he said they probably didn't go back because the king of Nabateh and the king of Judea were in alliance. And he would have said, where are those guys who came to me? And he would have put them in chains and sent them back to Herod. So that they hide out. They hide out somewhere else. So all of that is woven into the story. But again, that's the backdrop.
So much intrigue in this story.
There is. No, it's an adventure.
Yeah, yes.
And we have this solemn procession on the camels. BS to the camels. Arabian horses. 100 years.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
I saw the
show
horse.
that this is my favorite spread of the book, maybe. In fact, I almost made this the cover. And then I couldn't. 100 years before Christ, the Arabian horses were introduced into the kingdom of Nabateh.
Oh, yeah,
So my guys
that's
are on
great.
horseback. It's only a 3 to 5 day journey, by the way. It wasn't weeks or months or years. 3 to 5 day journey around the Dead Sea. You go past Bethlehem into Jerusalem. There it is. I love that they're on horseback and the caravans behind them, by the way, if you look closely.
So you're
they're the
saying
camels.
historically it makes more sense.
This makes much more sense. And I'm going to tell you what. The trade routes were quick trips for them. They knew the incense routes. Nabateh controlled those incense routes. Now, why, I teased this earlier, why frankincense, why gold and myrrh?
Yeah.
I only tipped this in the story, but it's in the back of the book and you can read more about this. Frankincense is tree sap. It's tree sap, and the trees are only grown in Arabia, in Nabateh. Tree sap was highly valued. Why? Everybody stank. People in that time, they smelled like hell.
Maple syrup.
So
you guys
no, they burn. You burn the
right,
frankincense.
of
It's
course,
incense. But where would it have been used? In the first temple, they burned incense to show the prayers wafting up to God. We carried that over into the Catholic worship. Okay,
Yes.
the incense,
Yes.
Orthodox have it. The
course.
incense. So frankincense is a tool of the temple. Gold. Gold was woven into the high royal priesthood garments. They were the only ones wearing gold, which is why we put gold on the headdresses of these guys. Okay, and then the myrrh, most important.
It's an oil.
It's an oil, but it was kept only in the first temple. When King Josiah shut down the first temple and expelled the priesthood, the myrrh went with it. No, it wasn't used anymore. But the myrrh was kept in the Holy of Holies, and it was used for a specific purpose. That purpose was to anoint new members of the royal priesthood and to initiate them in. So these three guys are going to anoint the royal priest to complete and restore the first temple, bring back the ancient ways, and they're bringing him the gold, but it's not to represent his kingly status, it's to make him a royal king of the priesthood. So there's an argument to be made here that they're clandestine priests and kings of the royal priesthood. So the king thing kind of fits, but not really. They're not the kings we think of.
Interesting how the gifts are the clue to where they actually came
Where they originated
Never
from
knew
and
that.
why they were going there. And when Margaret Barker showed me this, my head exploded.
Yeah.
Philo of Alexandria wrote about this in the 1st century. He was a contemporary of Jesus. And they write about what those three things were to those priests in the first temple. And they never did that again. So this makes the wise men like, it's a buddy movie. It's a buddy movie with high stakes. There's death around every turn. The lights on, the lights off. Where's the star? Where do we go? I got a pain in my side. Who do we go to? It's an adventure. So I recaptured that so that people and families realized these men were real. It's not a fable or fairy tale. And I've heard even biblical scholars, oh, that's a fairy tale. We don't know if that's true. St. Matthew opens his gospel with this story of the Magi and the star.
Right.
He was writing for a Jewish audience. He was the gospel for the Jewish people. Why is he opening with Magi? Why is he opening with the prophecy?
Yeah.
Why? Because they're members of the old ways. And by the way, Margaret showed me the translation in Aramaic, in Hebrew. Wise men from the East translates to, from the East also translates to wise men of the ancient ways. There's clues all over the place. And for once, our Da Vinci Code runs the right way. So this is good. This is a good story.
It's a good story. Okay, talk to me about the moment that they see the baby Jesus.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is the moment we commemorate. This is what the Epiphany is all about. Imagine if your people have been locked out of your land and you can't practice your faith. Because these guys thought that the temple that Herod created.
What that's like.
Well, we can. Some of us can understand that and commiserate.
Yeah.
Imagine if your means of worship was banished. You think what's in its place is pagan, which they did. They write horrible things in the Old Testament about Herod's temple and Solomon's temple and the subsequent temples. They don't like it. So 700 years you've been in exile, and now a Messiah has risen, a member of your priesthood. Imagine that, and you get to touch him and maybe anoint him and welcome him into this. You're restoring the temple. By the way, now when Easter comes around, this will change your Easter, by the way, too. Every time you read the gospel and Christ says to the people around him, you will knock this temple down and I will raise it in 3 days. It makes you want to cry. He's the temple. And these guys were the ones who helped complete the circle of 700 years and restore the first faith of Adam and Abraham. And by the way, you'll love this, particularly Catholics listening. In the Catholic Mass, we hear every week, they hear about Abraham and then the order of Melchizedek.
Yes.
The priesthood of Melchizedek.
Yes.
You know what the priesthood of Melchizedek was? The first temple. These guys were very likely members of that order of Melchizedek.
Okay.
So the whole thing comes circle.
It does.
You have a question? The
I
lumberjack
have
has
a question, but go ahead.
Come in.
No,
Come
you
in.
go ahead.
We want to see you.
Because I have a question too.
Sean Duffy comes in, special guest.
I can't get up.
I'm sitting in the back behind the camera listening to the story, and this is amazing. But so would Mary and Joseph have known the importance of the three wise men, and right? What was their
That's
knowledge
a great.
base?
We don't know that. We really don't know.
But what did they know?
Well,
Should they have known?
They probably did. I mean, this was a prayerful girl. Her father, and remember, her Zechariah, who's John the Baptist's father, they are very close. He was in the temple. Remember, he was an official in the temple. Surely they knew about the expelled priesthood and all of this. I think they knew all, and she knew he was a Messiah. So when these guys come,
that was confirmed to her.
The weight of this,
Yes.
but it's more than just some secular king bringing you here.
Yeah,
Look what we
yeah,
brought for
yeah.
you, some jewels and gold.
She understood
No,
the meaning.
She understood the meaning of this, and they probably explained it to her.
Would
But
the
I was
wise
texting Rachel my question. I'm like, can't go.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't
I'm
watching.
behind the
her.
camera. Like,
No,
this
it's
is so
perfect.
exciting. It's great.
I hope
Would
this
the
doesn't
wise-
violate your contributor status.
Yeah.
So you might have stepped over the line, but we'll let it go. Shh, don't tell.
Okay, would the wise men have been surprised at the scene they came upon?
Oh,
Would They
absolutely.
would have expected something more royal.
Right. Well, we have that in the book. You have Balthazar in my telling of the book. Balthazar, who's the African American, the darker wise man, which there's a lot of evidence. There's Irish writings that predate or that line up with the gospel, and they talk about the black magi. He's there from the beginning.
Yeah.
So that's not a creation of Bede,
Mm.
but that's kind of a oral
Part of it.
history that
Yeah.
carried on. And you've got to look at all the sources, and it all kind of comes together. But again, you're dealing with Arabia now. You're dealing with Nabateh. These are tribes, people in tribes in the desert. So, and you have Nabateh is Greek, Babylonian, African, Jewish. It's a melting pot. It's like New Orleans. So
Everything comes back. to
well,
New
it comes back to New
Orleans.
Orleans. That's my frame of reference. Everything. So these are kind of the jazz musicians of the.
Yeah.
But so you would have some
Yeah.
diversity there.
Yeah.
And Bede said, look, you got an older man, a middle-aged man, and a younger man to show the faith moves through generations and
Right.
received by
Of course.
generations. It's a sweet idea.
It
I
is.
decided to keep the iconography, but what their ages are, we don't know. But yeah, I think the stakes were high, and for them, this was life and death, and it's the reason for their lives. So yeah, it was high stakes. And
Okay, so
joyful.
Raymond, you talk about this being a family book. I agree.
Yes.
I think this is a family book, and
Okay.
this is exactly the way I anticipate that I'm going to read this book with my kids coming up here as we enter into the holiday season. So Patricia wants to know,
Okay.
what is your favorite part about being a father?
My favorite part of being a father is, well, you'll know this too. I treat my children the way mamas are different, because mamas, the child is with you and so close to you, your whole. I think mothers just have a different relationship with their children. They're
course.
always your baby. I've always regarded all my children as little people that are entrusted to us for a time, and my real job is to make them independent people and send whole people out into the world. That's really how I've always seen my job with them. Now, I love them and they're my babies. I have a baby here in New York, and it drives me crazy that he's in New York, frankly. But the favorite part is watching them grow into the people they were meant to be, not the people you wanted them to be.
Yeah.
Which is why I've
That's
kind
a
of,
hard thing to do.
yeah, you want to guide them, but you don't want to project yourself onto them. And you know this, when you're a father or a mother, you see all your sins and all your glories in every kid.
Yeah,
One
that's
version,
true.
and you all with 9, you got to
Yeah.
get multicolors around you, Technicolor.
Mhm.
And that is humbling. That's humbling, but it's a beautiful thing. There's nothing more important than family.
Nothing.
And that's what this book is about. The reality of these men on a mission for truth, willing to risk everything for that truth. And at the end of literally under the light of God, is a family. That's where it all leads.
Yeah.
And so there is something poetic and beautiful
Oh,
about this
for
time
sure.
of year, the story. There's one illustration. I'm going to give you all one little, I shouldn't have said this, but I will.
God could
It's
come in any form, and he came in family.
Right. There's a little Easter egg here. And in my telling, and there's a fictitious, I think largely fictitious Syrian manuscript or Arabic manuscript that supposedly is a gospel written by the wise men. It's not, it's make-believe. But there's some beautiful images in it. And one of it is when the wise men go up to the house, they discover that the light is not coming down from the star, but up from the house. And I loved that idea. And
Oh,
so,
I see that.
yeah. And so we carried it into the illustrations, and here it's really explicit. Look.
Yes.
And this came from Pope Benedict. Pope Benedict had a great line in his nativity book that said, we think that the star leads to the child. No, it is the child directing the star. And I loved that idea. And so I
Because
kind
you're a
of,
director.
but I love the image of that.
It is. It's a gorgeous
It's a
image.
deep theological
And I
image.
love how you captured it visually.
Well, let me tell you, Diane Le Feyer, I'm going to just rave on her. She's
Yes.
doing my next series as well. We just But Diane is such an artist. She does. Diane has the #1 series, something Adele. It's the biggest selling series in Europe. And it's a character like a little, she's like a scrappy Lucy Van Pelt, but a kind of troublemaker kid. She sold like 10 million copies of this thing.
Wow.
They're like comic books, but she's brilliant. But when I saw her actual,
Oh, I mean, these
Paintings,
images are breathtaking.
they are just splendid. Her sense of balance, composition, color,
Color.
and the emotion of these characters are so. I gotta tell you, this is the prettiest book I've ever done. I've done a bunch of picture books. This one is hands
breathtaking.
down the prettiest, and it's a treasure. And I think, and anybody who liked the spider who saved Christmas, this is the prequel to that book.
Yeah.
That's really what this is.
I collect Christmas books, and when
You
Christmas
do?
comes, I have a big box that I bring out, and I literally put the Christmas books away during the year, and I bring them out.
Bring them out without
And
just
Advent,
that time
yeah.
of year.
And this is like a collector's edition.
It's
kind
a
of
great
book.
Christmas
It's just and
gift.
what a great gift.
Yeah.
What a beautiful gift for the grandkids. What a beautiful way to bring the meaning of Christmas to any child and family that
Yeah.
you love.
And there was nothing in this, there's very little in this area. And most of that is, I have to tell you, it's kind of kitschy. And I found it insulting when I started researching these
I
guys.
love that.
Because
that
it's
you
the
don't-
three
you
kings
don't-
came and the
You
star.
don't dumb things down for kids, which is
No.
I think why you're such a successful author.
Well, the kids will love it. And I've already gotten notes and letters from people. And the kids see all the little Easter eggs that Diane and I wove into the thing. People ask, I
You
know
are
this-
going to blow kids away with the horses versus the camel. I mean, the camels are so iconic.
I know, but that's the idea. Arabian horse.
I mean, look, here they are. They're hanging out. It's
Yeah.
like spirit.
Look, they're right. There's the three of them over there, and the camels are in the background. But let me tell you something. I did a Fox News special, Fox Nation special on the historic background. We interviewed all of these experts, including Margaret Barker. So a lot of this information will come
coming
out
up for Fox Nation?
December 6th or 16th. It's in December.
Amazing.
But we got on Arabian horses. We went out on horseback and did a lot of our raps there. The horse trainer, who's been raising these things since he was a child, he said, you know why these Arabians are special? I said, well, they've got the long faces. They're beautiful, strong horses. He said, yeah, but what makes them special? I said, I don't know. What makes them special? He said, well, I'm going to let you ride one. You tell me what makes them special. So I got on it, and he goes, yeah! This thing took off like lightning. And I've been on horses off and on my whole life.
Mhm.
This thing,
They're fast.
and it wouldn't stop. I'm like, oh, whoa, would not stop. Arabian horses have one less rib than the other breeds, meaning they have a greater lung capacity, more endurance, can travel longer, and through hot climates and not pass out. That's what makes them, so they move certainly faster than a camel, but they have more resilience than a camel. So it makes perfect sense. Like everyone else during this era, including the Romans, they would have been on Arabian
Yeah,
horseback.
you want to get there quicker. We all want to get
Right,
there faster.
particularly if it was a royal delegation, and it was. So there was a caravan behind them, but these guys would have been in the lead.
So why did
I
we get the
think.
camels? How did
Because
they become
camels
part
are
of the
exotic.
story?
Camels are exotic, and the clump and the solemn procession, but it wasn't a solemn procession. It's a high stakes adventure. These guys are running for their lives. They've got to get the information and get to the Messiah before they're killed. That's
Yeah.
what's really
Well,
happening.
before the baby's still.
Well, before the baby's killed. And once they find out what Herod's designs are, but why? I always ask, wait, if they had this star and they knew the prophecy, why did they go to Herod?
Yeah, why did they?
Because their king told them they had to go to Herod. Because the wise men say at the opening of
I
my
always
book,
wondered that.
they spy the star. They go tell the king, we think there's a Messiah being born, a new king of Judea being born over there. And the king says, okay, well, go bring Herod tribute. Go bring him tribute, because we got to
Go
keep
check
the
in with
peace.
my friend.
Go ask Herod, but bring him some tribute, bring him some stuff, because they have to keep the peace. Why? 30 years before, Herod invaded the kingdom of Nabatea, and his mother was a Nabatean princess. These people are kin, and they knew how deadly Herod was. When you start putting all this together, and again, I don't get into the deep weeds of this. This is an adventure story for the family, but it's informed by a lot
Can I
of
get into the
serious
back
research.
of the book and get some of the
Yes,
stuff you're talking
It's
about?
all there. I wrote it.
I
There's a
love
long
that.
author's note at the end.
And
that
you can go to the
explains
Fox Nation special
Yes,
and get even
and
more.
get
Oh
it
yeah, there's some.
companion pieces.
Yes.
And I'm going to give you a little tease. I'm not saying who, but a country music artist of some esteem
Oh.
in Premier Collectibles' neck of the woods has recorded a new version of We Three Kings, since there weren't kings, called We Magi of Orient are. And Orient just means the
Did
East.
you order this song up?
She was inspired by the story, and then I bought, and one of my friends
You're
at the
taking
publisher
seriously
said,
this desire to change the name.
I want to change the narrative here. And they said, what do you want to do with it? Would you like to do it? I said, why don't we cut a new version of the song? We only have to change that one line. She did it, and that's coming out in December.
Wow,
So I'll
the
fill you in.
power of Raymond.
But I think it's an important story. And people say, why is it important? Why do we care about the wise men? All this background. Here's why. If they're fake and they're make-believe and they're mythology, then what they were seeking is probably mythology too. But if there's a historic reality here at play, and you can point to it and see evidence that leads you to the reality of these magi, then what they sought, the Christ child, to me, stands out in more relief, because you realize how dangerous this journey was for them. And that just, to me, it just enriches Christmas and deepens it, and children will be fascinated by the adventurous side of this and the beauty of these drawings.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
illustrations are spectacular.
Absolutely. I can't wait for the Fox Nation special. I didn't
I know.
that.
Well, I
Thought
didn't
had
either
all
until they
info
told me.
Fox, but
Yeah,
we
no,
learn
it's
something
good.
every day.
That's right.
We learn something every day. Okay, is there anything else about the book that you think everyone should know about?
The only other thing.
So I want people to discover it. I mean,
Yeah,
this is
they
something
will.
we
And
really
the
want
star,
to-
look, people always ask me, what's the star? What did they see in the sky? They're like, after tracing, this is a rabbit hole, by the way. You could spend the rest of your life reading astrologers, astronomers, historical astronomers. And I've interviewed some of them for the special, Cambridge astronomer and scientist.
There was a star that
There was a star. Michael Molnar, who's the astrologist who came up with the Bethlehem Star, the big
Yes.
book and miniseries. Here's how I feel about all that. We don't know what they saw. We really don't. There are 4 or 5 possibilities. Dr. Humphreys, whom I interviewed in the special, believes that it was 3 events. And those are historical events. You can see them. They're in Chinese writings. They're in Greek writings. There are 3 astrological events. A conjunction of planets, Jupiter in Aries, that was really bright. Then there was another cluster of planets several months later. And then you have a comet, which Molnar, others think that's what led them to the house, that it was the tail of a comet. Who knows? But whatever they saw, the lesson for us is you keep your eyes, the gospel has this, St. Paul writes of this, keep your eyes on what is above and not on the things of the earth. That's what the wise men did. And that to me is the real lesson of this whole, the stargazing bit. It's fascinating what it might have been. I mean, there's a coin that Molnar found that suggested that Jupiter was Judea, and Aries was the kingly sign, and that's what they saw when this conjunction
I want to
happened.
go back to
But
that's
I don't
so
know.
powerful what you just said, because we're living, we live the news, right? You and
Yes.
I, we live the news.
Sadly.
We're sadly, right? And there's so much bad stuff going on. There's so much sad news, bad news, scary news.
Yeah.
And yet this idea of that we should not be looking down here, that our hope, our lives really should be looking up
Right.
to where we want to go, where we
Correct.
want to be, which is in
Correct.
heaven, which is
And they're
the star
attentive to
above.
God,
Yeah,
as
and
they knew him.
attentive to God.
and that's the other thing. I guess the last thing I would say, what I love about the story, they didn't pursue God so much as he pursued them through their everyday work and their own passions, the things they were drawn to in the world. And I still think that's how he calls wise men today. He calls you through your work. He calls you through the things you see in nature and that you're drawn to. Your children, people around you, an event, a sunset. He draws you in different ways. Or sometimes it's a painful experience, but it's in your life, in the midst of life, that those calls go out. And sometimes they're as bright as that star, and sometimes you lose the star. That's what happens to these wise men. It goes out for them. After they see Herod, the star's gone. So they just proceed on to Bethlehem. And as they go, the light pops on for them again. And that's sometimes how you have to roll.
Yeah.
You have to go in faith sometimes. It will find you. But it doesn't unless you take that step.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I learned in this whole wise men journey.
Thank you for bringing the meaning of Christmas back.
Oh, thank you.
I really mean that. I think that you are a light in my life and our family's life, but you're a light on our culture. And I do think that you are always finding creative ways to bring what's important to get us to look up.
Yeah, well, you have to.
Literally in this
yeah.
book. Literally in this book. Raymond.
Thank you. Well, I loved
God
it. It
bless
was
you.
a fun journey, and I hope others will go on it. And I thank you all for being here. PremierCollectibles.com/wisemen, or you can go to RaymondArroyoBook.com, and there's a link there for a signed edition. And we will send you one of these signed editions. You can order them here. I know some of you can't join me on the tour, but you can have a signed edition of the book.
Can I
And-
have one?
Yes, you can have one.
You have to sign it so personally to this family. the
I'll
Duffy
do that.
family,
That's
right now.
that's done. Easy. All right, guys. Merry Christmas. Thank you for coming on the journey, and I hope you go with the wise men who found Christmas and re-find it yourselves. Thanks.
Aw.
Thank
Bye,
you,
everybody.
Rachel. Thank you for
Oh,
making this
thank you, Raymond.
so special.
So happy to be here.
Thank you. And
Blessed to be
special
here.
guest star Sean Duffy,
Mhm.
who's peeling papers for his next Christmas book. Does it all by hand. It's amazing. He's got pots here. He's soaking it in. It's beautiful. We're going to do a special on this Fox Nation next time.
Okay.
Thank you, guys. Bye now.
Bye, everybody.
Hey, this is John Acuff, New York Times best-selling author of 7 books and someone who's done a live signing. If you like the one you just watched, make sure you check out our YouTube channel. It's full of amazing authors having great conversations and signing books for viewers just like you. So make sure you subscribe, and thanks for watching today.